Hello everyone. In this video, we'll start working in Unity. I'll tell you about the program interface, what windows there are, and why you need them. Then, you'll find out how to move in a 3D scene, how to create and move objects, how to add files to the project, as well as why it is necessary to do so. Here is what the engine looks like when you have just opened a new project for the first time. Let's see what windows there are. To begin with, notice that we have a scene and a game window here. To make it clearer what we're looking at, I'll detach this game window and attach it here on the right. You can place windows in different parts of the interface and change their size. Since we are working on completely different games here, the position of the windows may also be different. You can arrange them in whatever way is most convenient for you. When you work on a laptop with a small screen, it often happens that the game window has frames like this. I recommend removing the low-resolution aspect checkmark here in the Free Aspect tab. It is absolutely useless in general. The scene window is the window where we will work on the scene. We will create and move objects here and actually create our level. The game window is how the end user sees our game, the final image of the game. There is a hierarchy window on the left. All the objects that are in our scene are listed here. There are 3 objects here. This is the main camera and the light, so we actually see them and can select them. Let's create some more objects to see how they will be displayed in the scene and in the hierarchy. In the Game Object tab, there are actually all the objects that we can create in Unity. Here, for example, is a 3D object. There are all sorts of cubes and spheres. Let's create them. A cube, a sphere, a capsule objects can be moved, and you can still copy them by pressing Ctrl+D on the keyboard. You can drag it using the arrow. It is simply copied in the same place. We see that all these objects are displayed in the hierarchy window, so we need the hierarchy window first of all so that these objects can be conveniently found and selected. And we also need to be able to select them simply in the scene window. You can create all the objects that are available here in the 3D tab. These are all 3-dimensional bodies that can be created in Unity. If you need something more serious, like a tree, a house, or a character, then they are usually imported from other packages and inserted into Unity in FBX format. Now, let's talk about how we can move around the scene to look at objects from different angles. First of all, if you do not have these arrows to move, then they are selected here. The Move tool must be active. Bodies can also be rotated and scaled. Let's stop there for now. So, how can we look at objects from different sides? To move in the plane of the screen, we hold down the mouse wheel and move the actual mouse. Here we also need to zoom in and out, which is done with the wheel, and we also need to look at objects from different sides. To do this, hold down Alt and the left mouse button. That's what you need to adapt, move, and look from different sides so that you can feel comfortable in the scene window. Another very important button for navigation is the F on your keyboard. It moves the camera closer to the selected object. In fact, this is how we will usually work. If you need an object, you just select this object, press the F button, and move closer to it, and the camera will rotate around it. This is a super important button. Press F all the time, because sometimes, for example, if an object is somewhere very far away, you will not even be able to move closer to it with the wheel. It will rotate endlessly for a long time, but if you press F, you move closer, and that is good. You can sometimes select an object in the Hierarchy tab, press F, and you will actually see where it is in the scene. In general, I insist that you move around the scene, move objects, and feel that everything is comfortable and understandable to you. As a practice, you can make a pyramid of objects like this. If you haven't worked in a 3D editor, it may be quite difficult for you to understand at first from which side you need to look at the object in order to expose it so smoothly. But when you're working in a scene, you always have to sort of rotate and look at how one object is really positioned in relation to another. Make a high pyramid. The less comfortable it is for you to work, the higher the pyramid must be to make it more convenient. What other options are there for moving? By the way, let me expand this scene window, it's so small. You can safely change it like this in the process of working. You can also expand the window to full screen. If you double-click the name of the window, it will expand like this to full screen. You can also do this with a Shift plus Space combination. There are still other navigation options in the window. For example, if you hold down the right mouse button, then you will look around like this, like in a shooter. For example, just look in different directions from one point. When this eye appeared on the screen, when we held down the right mouse button, you could see arrows like this there. This means that if we press the arrows on the keyboard, then it will be possible to move on the screen like this. I usually combine all these options for moving and rotating. If you press the Q button while the right mouse button is held down, you will move down. If E, you will move up. So that's why, in addition to the scene window, a hierarchy window is needed too. The next window on the right is the inspector. The properties of the selected object are displayed here. For example, I select directional light, and here are the actual parameters of the directional light. You can change the intensity. Here are the camera parameters. You can change the field of view. When I move the camera, the angle that is visible in the game window changes, actually exposing the camera. We adjust how the user will see the game. If, for example, this is a strategy game, then you can arrange this view from above. If this is a first-person shooter, then we will later stick this camera to the characters so that it moves together with the head. All objects have properties. For example, this is a cube. It has some components. We'll talk later about what components are, and how in general the object properties are made up. We also have a project window. This window contains all the files that you use in the project. We often need some sounds, textures, and materials in the project, and they will all be located here. It's just such a folder with files. Under the video, I attached files that we can import into the project. Download them. There will be a folder like this. Just take it and drag it into the project. As an example, I just showed that we can import different models, for example, in FBX format. How about a car? When I select it, the properties of this file also appear in the inspector window. Here you can see what it at least looks like, and models like this one can also be dragged into the project. And here is the sound. We will add them to the game later as well. This will also be located in the project folder. Or a font file, textures, those textures that we use on materials or icons. In addition to importing files, we can also create some files in Unity. We will often need materials if we want to make objects of, say, different colors. You can right-click the project window and select Create Material. A new material has been created. Its properties are displayed in the inspector window. I can set a color for it, and then drag it to one of the scene objects. Finally, let's talk about moving again. We learned that objects can be moved, and a moving tool must be used for this. You can rotate, and you can also scale with this tool along one axis or along all axes at once. If you want to set the position of an object exactly, then its coordinates can be entered here in its transform parameter. I'll move it all a little away from the center. Let's take a box and place it exactly in the center of the coordinates. To do this, you can enter 0, 0, 0 in the position parameter. I want to create a cubic tree like this, so I can set a scale for it like 0.2 along the x-axis and 0.2 along the z-axis. Let's have a tree trunk, then I will copy with a Ctrl+D combination. So, we have created a new object that can be moved. Let's give this one a scale of 0.6 by 0.6. So, we have something like this tree. And by the way, the hierarchy window is called that for a reason. Here we not only just see the objects that are in the scene, but there is also a hierarchy of these objects as well. For example, if you have a tree like this, it consists of two objects. If you want to imagine it as something like a single whole and move everything together, then you can create an empty object. I click Create, Empty, and I can name it right away. I'll name it something like Tree. Then I place it in the center of the coordinates, in the position 0, 0, 0. These parts of the tree can be placed into it. A cube and a cube. Now we have a composite object that can be moved as a whole. In order for you to practice and feel confident in the scene window, I also attached this very interesting thing in the Files folder. These are several objects that need to be taken and dragged into the project. With Shift, you can select them all and drag them into the hierarchy window. These are the pieces of the puzzle, and if you combine everything together, you will get a certain object. Here you will see what These are the blue areas, and one blue area must be glued to another blue area. For you to successfully implement this task, I will tell you about another interesting function. We need to precisely move one object to another. To do this, you need to hold down the V key on the keyboard, and then your cursor will be able to grab the current object by some point of it. You can grab it and drag it to some other point of the object. Then they will be positioned exactly on each other. And those are all the most important things about navigation and about moving an object in the scene window. You have now learned the very basics of the engine. I hope you like the interface. It seems very simple and logical to me. When I opened Unity for the first time 10 years ago, I was impressed by how many features can be placed in an interface with so few buttons and tabs. In this lesson, we have reviewed 5 main windows, each of which you will actively use further in your work.